pregnant wife visits millionaire husband, catches him publicly embracing his mistress. Serena Banks made a last-minute decision to surprise her millionaire husband in the city, expecting little more than a warm embrace and a stolen afternoon together. Instead, she witnessed a sight that would shatter her world. Anderson Banks holding another woman in a passionate clinch right in public. From that instant, her once secure life began to fracture, revealing dark secrets, hidden motives, and a betrayal destined to spiral into devastating consequences for everyone involved. If you're ready for a story overflowing with heartbreak, manipulation, and karmic twists, keep reading. This journey is only beginning. Serena Banks had always believed in the power of love. Raised in a modest home in upstate Vermont, she learned early that family and compassion mattered more than money or status. So when she met Anderson Banks, a self-made millionaire and respected entrepreneur, she never anticipated how drastically her life would change. At their first encounter, an investors' gala at the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan, Serena was assisting a friend at the registration table. Anderson, tall and composed, approached with an easy confidence, warmly introducing himself. His conversation wasn't the usual millionaire brag. He asked her about her day, her interests, and her passions. His eyes sparkled with what she thought was genuine curiosity. They married a year later in a beautiful ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. It felt like a fairy tale. Her parents wept tears of joy, the wine flowed freely, and the lush surroundings echoed with laughter. Serena moved into Anderson's penthouse on Fifth Avenue. There, she marveled at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the pristine decor curated by a top interior designer, and the staff who attended to every whim. Anderson's business thrived. He ran a consulting firm that specialized in scaling tech startups, and he was lauded by Forbes as the next unstoppable tycoon. Despite the glittering surfaces, Serena noticed small cracks in their idyll. Anderson's work demands were relentless. He traveled frequently: Hong Kong on Monday, London by Wednesday, back to New York for a high-stakes meeting on Friday. At first, Serena admired his drive. She busied herself with volunteer work at local shelters, supporting education initiatives, and even considered starting her own non-profit. Anderson encouraged her, though from a distance. He rarely had the time or energy for in-depth conversations, especially after he closed million-dollar deals. Still, he was generally thoughtful, sending her flowers when she least expected it, setting up spa days at the Mandarin Oriental, and taking her to lavish dinners at Le Bernardin whenever he was actually in town. Most nights, she fell asleep comforted by the idea that her husband was working hard for their future. She brushed aside the faint pang of loneliness that occasionally surfaced. Time, however, began to peel away the veneer. Tensions rose when Anderson stopped returning her calls promptly. On their wedding anniversary, he arrived 2 hours late to dinner, claiming a meeting had run long. He was present physically, but his mind seemed tethered to a labyrinth of spreadsheets, acquisitions, and phone calls. In the quiet corners of their expansive home, Serena sometimes felt like a guest rather than a wife. Although she tried to dismiss her suspicions, telling herself that high-powered business meant complicated demands, she still sensed a distance widening between them. Little did she know that her well-meaning optimism would soon collide with a stark reality. A single moment, an unexpected glimpse in a public space, would change everything. The universe was about to test both her heart and her marriage in a way she never imagined. Weeks before the fateful discovery, Serena experienced an unsettling dream. She saw Anderson in a crowd of faceless people walking away with someone else. She couldn't see the woman's face, but the vision left her shaken. Over breakfast, she mentioned the dream to Anderson, hoping for reassurance. He simply chuckled, brushing it off as just a dream, and changed the subject to his upcoming trip to Boston. Serena tried to push away nagging doubts. After all, Anderson had never been cruel or dismissive. He was kind in many ways. When their elderly neighbor broke her hip, he covered her medical bills. When a friend's nonprofit needed extra funding for a children's library, he wrote a check without blinking. That generosity was part of what made her fall in love with him. So why did a sliver of unease persist? Her friend Naomi noticed the shift in Serena's demeanor. They met at Balthazar in Soho for brunch, a familiar ritual. Normally, Serena would regale Naomi with cheerful updates about her volunteer work or the latest art exhibit she'd seen. This time she seemed distant, stirring her cappuccino absently. "Are you okay?" Naomi asked, her brow creased with concern. "I'm not sure," Serena admitted. "Anderson's always so busy and I can't shake the feeling something's different." Naomi gently suggested that maybe Serena should plan a surprise visit to Anderson's office or travel with him on one of his business trips. Sometimes seeing a person in their work environment clears up doubts. Maybe you'd see how intense it is for him, or maybe you'd get some answers about what's really going on. The idea lingered in Serena's mind. She'd rarely visited Anderson's office, he'd always insisted. There was little point, that it was so hectic and not much fun. Perhaps it was time to see for herself how he operated on a day-to-day basis. The next day, she mentioned her plan over dinner. "I was thinking I'd drop by your office tomorrow afternoon. Bring lunch and meet some of your team," she said casually. Anderson paused in the middle of slicing his steak. His eyes flickered with something, a momentary flash of alarm or perhaps annoyance before he plastered on a polite smile. "Oh, I'd love that," he replied, too eagerly. But tomorrow's jam-packed with back-to-back meetings. The day after might be better. Something about the speed of his response and the slight tension in his shoulders triggered alarm bells in Serena's mind. But she nodded, not wanting to push. "All right. I'll come by on Wednesday then." He gave a curt nod, returning his focus to dinner. Serena's stomach churned. Although they carried on with mundane conversation afterward, she sensed a ripple beneath the surface, like a warning that a hidden truth was poised to break free. She wanted to believe her husband was as loyal as he'd always seemed, but her instincts told her there was a storm on the horizon. And storms have a way of revealing everything once they start raging. Wednesday morning dawned cool and grey, a thin veil of clouds wrapping the Manhattan skyline. Serena woke early, energized by a mix of apprehension and determination. She decided to dress in something that balanced sophistication with comfort, a beige cashmere sweater, tailored navy trousers, and low-heeled pumps. She didn't want to appear out of place in Anderson's polished corporate world, but she also didn't want to look as though she was putting on airs. After a quick breakfast, she booked a ride and arrived at Anderson's consulting firm, Banks and Associates, just before noon. The building was an imposing steel and glass tower near Times Square, bustling with suits and tourists weaving in and out. Serena had visited only twice, once during its grand opening and another time when she dropped off a celebratory cake for Anderson's birthday. She made her way to the 25th floor reception. The lobby featured a contemporary design with sleek couches and modern art installations. A meticulously dressed receptionist, Andrea, greeted Serena with professional warmth. "Mrs. Banks, it's so nice to see you. Mr. Banks is in a meeting, but I'll let him know you're here." Serena nodded, trying to quell the flutter in her stomach. She took a seat in the waiting area, scanning the high-traffic corridor. Employees bustled about, clutching laptops or manila folders, some offering polite smiles. The entire environment radiated a sense of urgency, deadlines, deals, pressure. She wondered how Anderson thrived in this constant whirlwind. Minutes ticked by. 10, then 15. Andrea ventured over, her smile tinged with awkwardness. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Banks." Mr. Banks appears to be running late from an off-site meeting. We haven't heard from him yet. Curious. Serena had expected him to be in his office given his schedule. I see, she said, forcing a polite smile. She decided to wait a bit longer, hoping he'd return soon. Another 15 minutes elapsed with no word. Andrea approached again, apologizing profusely. Perhaps you could try his cell phone? Andrea suggested gently, as if it were entirely normal for the CEO to be out of communication. Serena nodded, stepping away to call him. Voicemail. She sent a brief text. Hey, I'm at your office. Thought we were meeting. Everything okay? 10 minutes later, still no response. A prickle of concern crawled up her spine. A swirl of possibility flickered in her mind. Maybe he was stuck in traffic, or a deal negotiation had gone awry. But a deeper fear gnawed at her. What if he was with someone else? Feeling uneasy, she thanked Andrea and decided to leave. The atmosphere in the office felt stifling, as though it held secrets she couldn't decode. Before heading out, Serena resolved to track down Anderson on her own. She'd never typically done something like that. Privacy had always been paramount. But the circumstances and her intuition compelled her to break tradition. She took the elevator down to the ground floor, glancing at her phone for any missed calls. Nothing. Stepping outside into the midday Manhattan clamor, she paused, inhaling the city's frenetic energy. Something told her that if she looked hard enough, she might uncover what was really going on. A new determination settled in her bones. She flagged down a taxi, giving the driver the address of Anderson's favorite hotel bar where he often conducted off-site meetings. If he was there, she'd find him. If not, she'd keep looking until she had the answers she needed. The taxi ride across Midtown felt interminable, the honks and sirens blending into a cacophony of tension swirling in Serena's mind. She replayed recent events, Anderson's late-night returns, his hushed phone conversations, the abrupt shift in his behavior. With each passing block, her heart rate climbed. She directed the driver to the Royal Meridian Hotel, a lavish spot known for hosting high-profile business gatherings. It was one of Anderson's preferred off-site locations, especially for lunches or discreet investor conversations. Stepping out onto the sidewalk, she instinctively pulled her sweater closed against a gust of cool wind. Inside, the opulent lobby shone with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Serena headed for the bar area, a sleek lounge with tinted windows overlooking the street. A few business types in suits congregated around tables, laptops open, coffees half drunk. She scanned the room quickly for Anderson's tall figure. He wasn't there. For a moment, relief mingled with disappointment. Perhaps she'd been imagining things. Maybe his meeting truly was elsewhere. She approached the bartender, a neatly groomed young man who recognized her from previous visits with Anderson. "Afternoon, Miss S. Banks," he greeted politely. "Looking for Mr. Banks?" Serena nodded with a tentative smile. "Yes, actually. Has he been in today?" The bartender pursed his lips as though pondering. "He was here earlier, left about half an hour ago with a group. I think they headed toward the sidewalk cafe outside, possibly for a break or to continue their discussion." Serena's heart pounded. "Thank you," she managed, turning toward the lobby exit that led to the side courtyard. She pushed through the glass doors and immediately felt the crisp air on her cheeks. Nestled between towering buildings, the courtyard cafe boasted bright umbrellas and a scattering of patrons sipping coffee. And there, in a corner near a potted palm, she caught sight of him. Anderson sat across from a stylish woman with auburn hair cascading around her shoulders. They seemed engrossed in conversation. No, not conversation. Something deeper. The woman leaned in, her hand lightly brushing Anderson's arm. Serena's pulse throbbed in her ears. She took a cautious step forward, not wanting to create a scene yet. As if in slow motion, she watched the woman stand up, moving around the small table, and slip her arms around Anderson's neck. He responded by gently wrapping his arms around her waist. Their heads tilted, faces inches apart, in an unmistakably intimate embrace. The cafe's chatter faded. Serena felt time freeze. Her stomach lurched, a nauseous wave of realization gripping her. She blinked, hoping she was hallucinating, but the sight remained agonizingly clear. Her husband was holding another woman, gazing at her in a way Serena once believed was reserved only for her. She must have made a noise, a stifled gasp or a cry, because Anderson suddenly looked up, eyes locking onto Serena's. Horror rippled across his face. The woman in his arms noticed his shock and turned to see what had startled him. Their eyes met Serena's, brimming with guilt and shock. In that split second, a tumult of emotions tore through Serena: disbelief, heartbreak, rage. She wanted to run, to scream, to vanish. Instead, she stood rooted to the spot, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. All she could see was the betrayal etched on Anderson's face and the cold confirmation of what her intuition had feared for so long. It was all real, painfully real. Nothing would ever be the same again. For a moment, no one moved. Anderson stayed frozen in the midst of that illicit embrace, the auburn-haired woman's arms still draped around his neck. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the woman hastily broke contact, stepping back with a stricken expression. Serena took a halting breath, stepping forward. Each footstep on the tiled courtyard echoed in her mind. She felt the weight of every gaze in the cafe, curious onlookers picking up on the unfolding drama. Anderson jerked to his feet, nearly toppling a coffee cup. "Serena," he began, voice cracking. Serena's eyes flashed between Anderson and the woman. Her voice shook as she finally found her words. "What is going on here?" Her tone was low, taut with tension. She could barely recognize the sound of her own voice, which wavered between fury and heartbreak. Anderson's jaw worked, but no coherent sentence emerged. The other woman glanced around nervously, as though calculating the best escape route. Instead of offering an explanation, she mumbled, I'll go," and swiftly gathered her purse from the table. But Serena blocked her path, arms folded. "Wait," Serena said, her gaze piercing. "You obviously know my husband. I'd like to hear who you are before you run." A flush crept over the woman's cheeks. She cast Anderson a panicked look. "I'm Valerie," she said quietly, refusing to meet Serena's eyes. She wore a sleek black blouse and pencil skirt, exuding a polished professional aura. I'm his business associate." A bitter laugh escaped Serena's lips. "Business associate who greets him with a hug like that?" Valerie's face twisted in guilt. She stammered, "It's not. We're working on a project together. We've grown close, but—" "Stop," Serena cut in, raising a trembling hand. "Don't insult me by lying further. I can see exactly what's going on." She turned to Anderson, who stood as though petrified, his face pale. "How long?" she demanded, tears threatening to spill. "How long have you been betraying me like this?" Anderson's shoulders slumped, regret flickering in his eyes. "Serena, please," he begged in a hushed tone, mindful of the onlookers. "Not here. Let's go somewhere private." A strangled sob tore from Serena's throat. "Private," she repeated, her voice thick with pain. "You're the one who chose to do this in public, so why not talk about it right here?" She gestured toward the few spectators who pretended not to listen, but clearly were. He reached out to place a hand on her arm, but she jerked away. "I'm sorry," he breathed. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." The weight of his words tore at her heart. "Is there ever a good way for a wife to find out her husband is cheating?" she asked, voice quivering. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to crumble in front of the world. Instead, she stepped back, struggling to maintain her composure. The woman, Valerie, looked as though she wished she could vanish into thin air. Finally, some primal, protective instinct told Serena to remove herself from the humiliating scene. She pivoted and hurried away, ignoring Anderson's desperate calls of her name. She pressed through the curious crowd, her chest tight and vision blurred. By the time she reached the street, she sucked in a shaky breath of Manhattan air, feeling both furious and shattered. The foundation of her life had just caved in. Betrayal stung sharper than she could have imagined, yet somewhere beneath the heartbreak, a spark of resolve flared. She wouldn't let this define her, nor would she quietly slink away. If Anderson had chosen to sabotage their marriage with lies, then he would soon realize the cost of such treachery. And that cost, she vowed, would not be small. Serena spent the rest of the day in a haze, walking aimlessly through the streets of Manhattan. She hadn't brought a coat, and the cold autumn air gnawed at her, but she barely felt it. She could still see the image of Anderson locked in that embrace, the guilty look in his eyes. It replayed in her mind like a twisted film reel. Eventually, she found herself at the doorstep of her closest friend, Naomi, who lived in a cozy apartment near Washington Square Park. Naomi opened the door to see a tear-streaked Serena, hair disheveled, eyes dull. Without a word, Naomi enveloped her in a tight hug. They sat on the plush couch in Naomi's living room, a half-empty tissue box on the coffee table. Serena recounted the horrifying scene, the cafe courtyard, the stolen embrace, the shock. I couldn't breathe, she murmured, voice trembling. He was right there with her, in the open. It's like he didn't even care. Naomi's eyes burned with protective anger. That's despicable, she fumed. I always thought Anderson respected you, and to do it so openly? He's lost his mind. Serena felt a wave of helpless tears welling up again. I don't even know what to do next, she confessed, burying her face in her hands. Do I confront him at home? Do I ask for an explanation? Do I just leave? Naomi gently placed a hand on Serena's shoulder. First, breathe, she whispered. You have to decide what's right for you, but you're not alone in this. They talked for hours. Naomi made tea, then later ordered takeout sushi, coaxing Serena to eat a few bites. The conversation turned to practical matters, the penthouse, their finances, the possibility of separation. Although Serena felt raw and unsteady, she also recognized a faint current of anger fueling her. He doesn't just get to do this and keep pretending everything's fine, she said, voice firm. Do you have a place to stay tonight? Naomi asked, glancing at the time nearly midnight. Serena shook her head slowly. She had no desire to face Anderson after what she'd seen, but she also worried about leaving him to spin some false narrative. In the end, she decided it was best to maintain her ground. She had every right to return to her own home, no matter how uncomfortable that might be. She thanked Naomi for her unwavering support, promising to update her on any developments. Wiping her eyes, she hailed a cab for the short ride to the penthouse. Her hands shook during the ride. She didn't even check her phone for messages from Anderson, though it buzzed a few times in her bag. She wasn't ready to face his excuses just yet. When she arrived at the building, the doorman greeted her with a courteous nod, oblivious to the storm raging in her life. Serena stepped into the private elevator that whisked her up to the 40th floor. The doors slid open, revealing the dimly lit foyer of their luxurious home. She braced herself, stepping inside, not knowing if Anderson had beaten her here. She suspected he had. The big question was, how would she handle the conversation when it inevitably came? She wasn't sure, but she knew she wouldn't cower, and she wouldn't accept half-hearted apologies. With a tearful anger burning in her chest, Serena prepared to face the man who'd broken her heart and to ensure he understood the gravity of his betrayal. The penthouse was eerily quiet. As Serena walked through the foyer, her footsteps echoed against the marble floor. Typically, soft lighting would be on, perhaps the distant hum of a news channel if Anderson was home. Tonight, it felt like an abandoned palace. Her eyes flicked toward the large clock above the fireplace, nearly 1 a.m. She wandered into the living room, dropping her purse on a side table, listening for any sign of life. Nothing. Weariness tugged at her. On any other day, she might have taken a soothing bath or curled up with a good book. But now, all she felt was a gnawing sense of violation. Suddenly, she heard the sound of keys rattling at the front door. Her pulse spiked, and she braced herself. The door swung open, and Anderson stepped in. He looked disheveled, tie askew, eyes bloodshot, hair mussed. He locked eyes with Serena. For a moment, they just stared at each other in silence. "Serena," he began, voice low and shaky. "I'm sorry." She cut him off with a trembling hand in the air. "Don't," she said in a near whisper. "I can't listen to hollow words right now." His face crumpled with regret. He took a few tentative steps forward. "I never wanted you to find out like that. It's complicated." "It's not complicated," she interjected, her tone growing sharper. "You cheated on me, Anderson. You lied to me. You've been—" Her voice caught on a sob. "I trusted you." He swallowed hard. "I won't deny what you saw," he said, avoiding her gaze. "But it wasn't just mindless cheating. Valerie is. She's someone I've been working with closely for months." It started innocently. Then Serena let out a bitter laugh, her tears brimming. "Innocent? You call that innocent?" She gestured toward the memory of their public display. "You humiliated me. If you had issues in our marriage, you could have spoken to me, demanded counseling, anything. But you decided to slip around behind my back." Anderson's shoulders sagged. "I know I handled it terribly. There's no excuse. Valerie and we got carried away. It's not about you. It's about me feeling overshadowed by the business, the pressure. That's your justification?" Some midlife crisis," she snapped, her voice rising in anger. "Do you have any idea how that looked to me, to everyone else? Do you even care how I feel, or is this all about your guilt?" He reached out as if to comfort her, but she recoiled. "Don't touch me," she hissed, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. "You ruined our life together. I have no idea how to proceed from here." For a moment, all he could do was bow his head, as if burdened by shame. "I'm begging you to give me a chance to explain further. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." She stepped back, crossing her arms over her chest in a protective stance. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "Right now, I need space," she murmured, glancing away to wipe her tears. "I can't share a bed with you. I can barely stand in the same room." Anderson opened his mouth, but no words emerged. He nodded numbly, as though aware this was the least he could do. Without another glance, Serena turned and made her way toward the guest bedroom, a room she never thought she'd need. She locked the door behind her, slumping onto the bed, sobbing into a pillow. Despite the luxurious surroundings, everything felt hollow, irreparably broken. As the night wore on, Serena stared at the ceiling, drifting in and out of fitful sleep. With each flicker of consciousness, she revisited the horrifying realization of Anderson's betrayal. She wondered if this was how her marriage ended, with tears and closed doors, each trapped in separate rooms of a once shared life. The heartbreak ached, like a wound that refused to scab over. And in that unending darkness, she vowed that if Anderson thought he could sweet-talk his way out of this, he was gravely mistaken. The following days were a surreal blur. Serena avoided Anderson as much as possible, rising early to slip out before he awoke, returning late from Naomi's place or from solitary walks around the city. She found some solace in the quiet corners of Central Park, letting the brisk autumn air clear her mind. But ignoring the problem wouldn't make it vanish. Meanwhile, the tension in the penthouse was palpable. They'd share minimal conversation, mostly about housekeeping or trivial details, like the time the cleaning service would arrive, never addressing the elephant in the room. On the rare occasions when Serena crossed paths with Anderson, he looked haunted, as though guilt were a visible weight on his shoulders. Surprisingly, news of Anderson's public indiscretion began to leak within certain social circles. A friend of Naomi's had been at the cafe that day and recognized him. Whispered rumors spread at charity dinners and business events. Serena found herself on the receiving end of sympathetic stares from acquaintances who offered half-hearted condolences. She realized that the ripple effect of betrayal extended far beyond her own home. In the high society sphere they inhabited, gossip was currency. Even more troubling, Serena noticed signs of strain in Anderson's business dealings. She overheard phone calls where he sounded uncharacteristically rattled. She heard him mention damage control and potential fallout. Her curiosity piqued, and despite her resentment, she found herself eavesdropping on one phone call. "I understand the client's concerns." Anderson's voice came through the study door, low but urgent. "But personal matters shouldn't impact the deal. We'll finalize the contract by next week." "No, I've got it under control. Just tell them I'm still their point of contact." After the call, he stumbled out of the study, looking worn. Their eyes met, and a moment of painful silence passed. "Trouble in paradise?" she asked quietly, unable to hide the bitterness in her voice. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Some investors heard about the incident," he admitted. "It doesn't paint me in the best light. They're concerned about my stability." "Or your credibility," Serena remarked, swallowing a lump of resentment. Hard to trust a man who cheats on his wife and can't keep his personal life in check. A flicker of hurt danced across his features. "Serena, I'm trying to fix things. I'm reaching out to a counselor. I'll sign up for therapy. Anything. Please believe me." She hugged herself, stepping back. "Are you trying to fix it because you truly regret what you did, or because your business is threatened?" He looked wounded by her question. "Both," he admitted softly. "I do regret hurting you more than anything, but I also know my reputation is on the line." Serena's heart twisted. She could see a sliver of sincerity in his eyes, but the memory of him embracing another woman still burned in her mind. The relentless gossip swirling in their community only fanned the flames of her anger. "Then you have a lot of work to do," she said, turning away. Late that night, as she lay in the guest bedroom, the city lights casting shadows on the ceiling, Serena wondered if she could ever trust him again. Meanwhile, outside their penthouse walls, the rumor mill churned, and Anderson's empire showed signs of cracking under the weight of scandal. Perhaps, Serena thought, it was the universe's way of ensuring that the consequences of betrayal wouldn't simply blow over. Karma, it seemed, had begun to circle, and it wouldn't be leaving any time soon. A week slipped by, each day marked by tension-laden silences and late-night arguments that flared briefly only to be swallowed by exhaustion. Despite the emotional strain, Serena found herself increasingly curious about the woman who had upended her marriage. Who was Valerie, and how deeply did her relationship with Anderson run? She tried to quell her urge to confront Valerie directly. After all, the responsibility of marriage vows fell on Anderson. Still, unanswered questions gnawed at Serena's sense of closure. Seeking clues, she found herself sifting through Anderson's work files in the study one evening after he'd stepped out for a meeting. She wasn't proud of the invasion of privacy, but desperation overshadowed her guilt. Just as she was flipping through a thick folder labeled Valerie Manning, the door of the study creaked open. Serena froze, thinking Anderson had returned. Instead, a middle-aged man with a neat moustache stood in the doorway, carrying a briefcase. She recognized him as Harold Peters, Anderson's head of finance, a loyal employee who'd been with the company from its early days. Surprise flickered across Harold's face. "Oh, Miss S. Banks, I didn't realize you were in here," he said, clearing his throat. "I was looking for some documents Anderson asked for. My apologies." She offered a hesitant smile, trying to compose herself. "It's all right. I was just tidying up." Harold stepped forward, placing the briefcase on the desk. "He told me I could grab the financial statements from his study. Hope it's okay." Serena nodded, suddenly curious. "Of course. Harold, can I ask you something?" Her voice was tentative. He paused, raising an eyebrow. "Certainly, if it's within my capacity." Serena took a breath. "You've known Anderson a long time. Has he ever mentioned a relationship with one of his associates named Valerie Manning?" A guarded expression clouded Harold's face. He glanced at the folder in Serena's hand. "I'm not sure what's appropriate to say, Miss S. Banks, but I can tell you that Miss Manning was hired as a consultant to expand our firm's marketing strategies. She's very capable." Serena pressed her lips together. "I see. Capable at marketing and apparently more." She sighed, feeling a wave of sorrow. "I'm sorry. You don't have to be in the middle of this." A flicker of compassion crossed Harold's features. He set down a stack of documents. "Miss S. Banks, if I may speak frankly, I have great respect for Anderson, but I've disapproved of this situation for some time. 1. Inadvertently learned about their personal entanglement. It was never my place to intervene, but I worried it would end badly." Emboldened by Harold's candor, Serena asked, "Do you know how long it's been going on?" He hesitated, then answered quietly, "A few months at least. But Miss Manning had been quite aggressive in forging a close bond with him. She used her role to gain his confidence. Some of us suspected her intentions weren't purely professional." An ache tightened in Serena's chest. "Months. He'd been lying to her for months." "Thank you, Harold," she whispered. "I appreciate your honesty." He nodded, sympathy evident in his eyes. "You deserve better, Miss S. Banks. And I'm certain that if this scandal escalates, the board won't be pleased with Miss Manning's methods." Serena took a moment to absorb his words. She remembered the rumors swirling about the business fallout, how clients felt uneasy about Anderson's personal turmoil. It seemed Valerie's push for closeness might have extended beyond romance, perhaps, into leveraging her influence for professional gain. As Harold departed, Serena placed the folder back on the desk, her mind racing. Learning more about Valerie's manipulative streak strangely strengthened her resolve. She realized that not only had her marriage been targeted, but her husband's business, too, was at risk of succumbing to hidden agendas. If Anderson truly wanted to salvage their life together, he would have to extricate himself from Valerie's grasp. Otherwise, the entire Banks empire and their marriage might crumble in the wake of betrayal. Spurred by her conversation with Harold, Serena felt an uncharacteristic surge of anger and purpose. She was tired of feeling like a victim, tiptoeing around her own home, burdened by heartbreak. If Anderson wouldn't give her full honesty, she'd force the situation. The opportunity arose the very next day when she discovered an email on Anderson's laptop, left open by mistake, that read, "Meeting with Valerie at 2 p.m. to finalize marketing strategy. Ritz-Carlton Lounge." The subject line and time were impossible to ignore. This was her chance to witness them together, not by accident but on her own terms. At precisely 1:45 p.m., Serena arrived at the Ritz-Carlton Lounge, a plush setting with soft piano music and lavish armchairs. She wore a sleek black trench coat over a fitted dress, her hair pulled back in a low chignon. The transformation from the tearful wife to a poised, steeled woman was remarkable. She scanned the lounge until she spotted them. Anderson and Valerie, seated in a corner, heads bent close as they perused some documents. For a moment, she hovered near the entrance, gathering her courage. Then, recalling the humiliating day she'd found them in the cafe, she channeled her fury into a determined stride. She approached their table, ignoring the curious stares from other patrons. Valerie noticed her first. The consultant's face blanched, and her eyes darted anxiously to Anderson. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his coffee cup. "Serena," he said, voice laden with dread. "What are you doing here?" Serena offered a tight smile. "I could ask you the same. Discussing marketing strategies, are we?" Her gaze flicked to Valerie, who had frozen in place. Anderson fumbled. "We're finalizing some proposals. This is business." The guilt etched in his features told another story. Valerie recovered her composure enough to speak. "Serena, I'm sorry for the confusion. We didn't expect." "Spare me." Serena's eyes flashed. "I know exactly who you are and what you've been doing with my husband." She turned her attention to Anderson. "You told me you'd do whatever it takes to mend things, yet here you are with her again." He put his hands up in a placating gesture. "Serena, I swear this is a professional meeting. We're wrapping up her consulting contract. After you found out, I ended the affair." "Valerie understands that." Valerie's expression tightened. "Yes," she interjected, her voice laced with frustration. "We've discussed it. Anderson and I agreed to keep our relationship strictly professional from now on." Serena let out a sharp laugh. "A little late for that, don't you think?" She lowered her voice, but her tone held a steely edge. "Professional relationships don't include embraces in public cafes." Valerie squirmed, glancing around at the watchful eyes of other guests. "We never meant to hurt you," she said, her attempt at contrition coming off as hollow. A hush fell, broken only by the distant clink of cutlery. Anderson reached for Serena's hand, but she pulled away. She'd come here to see if his words of apology matched his actions, and from the tension in the air, it seemed they did not. "Let's be clear," Serena said, her voice calm but resonating with quiet fury. "Either this meeting ends with a complete severance of any personal relationship, or I walk out of our marriage. I won't tolerate further betrayal." Anderson exhaled shakily, eyes darting to Valerie. "It's over," he said, each syllable heavy with finality. "We concluded our personal entanglement days ago. This meeting is strictly about finalizing her marketing plan deliverables. I promise you." Valerie swallowed, nodding stiffly. "Yes, we're finishing the last handover documents, that's all." Serena scanned them both, her chest tight. She wanted to believe that this affair had ended. But trust was not regained overnight. She leaned in, voice trembling with emotion. "I hope, for your sake, that's true. Because if I sense even a hint of deception again, Anderson, I'm done. No second chances." With that, she spun on her heel and left, her heart pounding. She wanted to run, to cry, to scream. The lounge door closed behind her, and she exhaled a shuddering breath. She hadn't gotten the closure she yearned for, but she had drawn a line in the sand, one more lie, and the life they'd built would disintegrate for good. In the aftermath of the tense Ritz-Carlton confrontation, a veneer of calm settled over Anderson's and Serena's marriage. Anderson insisted he'd severed ties with Valerie, promising that their partnership, both personal and professional, was definitively over. He began arriving home earlier, skipping the usual business dinners, and showing renewed interest in Serena's life. For a moment, Serena allowed herself a flicker of hope. She started attending counseling sessions with him, at his request, to explore whether trust could be rebuilt. But like a wound that's only superficially healed, their relationship was far from healthy underneath. While the gossip in their social circles died down, the business repercussions lingered. Rumors of impropriety had spooked some of Anderson's major clients, causing them to delay or back out of contracts. Suppliers grew wary, uncertain if the CEO's personal scandal hinted at deeper corporate instability. Anderson's board of advisors demanded clearer financial disclosures. concerned that his personal entanglements might have impacted the firm's performance. One evening, Serena found Anderson in his study, sifting through piles of documents with a frantic energy she'd rarely seen in him. "Everything okay?" she asked softly, stepping inside. He glanced up, looking more worn than ever. "The board is threatening to cut my discretionary powers if we don't bounce back this quarter. They're also investigating some of Valerie's expense reports to ensure nothing inappropriate took place on the company's dime." Serena's brow furrowed. Were there questionable expenses? Anderson blew out a breath. "A few dinners that might have been personal. Hotel charges labeled as business stays. Things I was too careless about covering up because I never thought we'd get caught." She felt a sting at his words. "I see." He caught the pain in her expression and quickly added, "I regret all of it. But now we're dealing with a potential meltdown of everything I've built. If the board loses confidence in me, the company could suffer irreparably." Serena's anger toward him softened momentarily. He was reaping the fallout of his actions, and it showed. She knew how much this company meant to him. It was his identity, his life's work. She wanted to be supportive, but the betrayal still loomed large in her heart. She cleared her throat, choosing her words. "Then be transparent with them. Own your mistakes. Lying or denying is only going to make things worse." His eyes shone with remorse. "I know. I'm doing everything I can, but it feels like my life is unraveling at every seam." Serena stood there, conflict swirling inside her. She felt torn between wanting to comfort him and wanting to remain distant out of self-preservation. She stepped closer, placing a tentative hand on his shoulder. "Then do what's right completely. Not for me, not for the board, but for yourself. Stop hiding." He covered her hand with his voice trembling. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve your kindness after everything." She offered him a sad, small smile. "Kindness is all I have left to give you right now. We'll see if we can rebuild anything beyond that." Leaving him to his documents, Serena retreated to the silent corridors of their home. She realized that while she ached for the marriage they once had, it might never return to its former state. Hard karma had begun to strike, not just personally, but professionally. Anderson was caught in a maelstrom of his own making, and she was only halfway convinced he truly grasped the extent of the damage. Still, she sensed that the final judgment was yet to be rendered. Fate has a way of demanding its due, and Anderson's debts were piling up. The summons arrived on a grey afternoon, a formal notice requesting Anderson's presence at an emergency board meeting. Serena found the sealed envelope on the foyer table, presumably delivered by a company courier. The date was set for the next morning, and the statement inside was terse but ominous, something about serious allegations and urgency in resolving them. That evening, Serena returned from a volunteer shift at a youth center to find Anderson pacing the living room. He clutched the letter in one hand, a phone in the other, face taut with dread. "They're not waiting for the quarter's end. They want a resolution now," he said, voice unsteady. "They suspect corporate funds were misused during my affair. Valerie was apparently billing certain personal expenses to the firm. If they confirm that, I'm done, possibly facing legal action." Serena's heart clenched, but she maintained a calm front. "Is there any truth to it?" Anderson sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "A bit. Valerie used a corporate card for some of our dinners, though I never explicitly authorized it. But I didn't object either. That alone might be enough for them to claim negligence or fraud." She seated herself in a chair opposite him, arms folded protectively. "So, the board meeting is tomorrow?" He nodded, cheeks flushed. "Yes, I'll have to present evidence that I can rectify the situation. Maybe reimburse the company out of my personal funds. Possibly resign from certain leadership positions. I don't know." His voice broke slightly. "I never thought it would end like this. Serena breathed in, trying to quell her complicated feelings. You still have a chance to be honest and own up to your mistakes. That might help. He glanced at her, a mix of desperation and gratitude in his eyes. Will you come with me tomorrow? Stand by my side, he whispered. I know I've given you no reason to, but, she hesitated, her heart twisted. Part of her wanted to see him face the consequences alone. Another part remembered the man she once loved deeply, the one who guided her through the labyrinth of Manhattan's high society, who supported her philanthropic endeavors without question. Fine, she said at last. I'll go, but don't mistake my presence for blind loyalty. I need to hear the truth myself. Anderson nodded, relief tinged with apprehension. Thank you. The following morning, Serena dressed in a tailored navy suit, pulling her hair back into a neat bun. She looked every bit the poised, confident partner of a corporate mogul, but inside, her nerves roiled. Anderson donned a crisp grey suit, face drawn in solemn focus. They rode in silence to the downtown skyscraper housing the Banks and Associates headquarters. Upon arrival, they were escorted to a large conference room where the board members sat in a semicircle. The atmosphere was charged. Documents were spread out on the table, and Serena spotted references to expense reports, suspicious transactions, and potential code of conduct violations. The tension prickled her skin. Anderson stood at the front, clasping his hands to stop them from trembling. He spoke candidly, detailing that he had allowed personal lines to blur, acknowledging that Valerie, though hired for marketing, had exploited that closeness. He confessed to not scrutinizing her expense reports carefully. He offered to repay every disputed charge, resign from certain committees, and re-earn the board's trust. The board members listened impassively. Then came a barrage of questions, each more pointed than the last. They pressed on timelines, questioned the personal relationship, demanded receipts for everything from hotel stays to lavish dinners. Anderson answered to the best of his ability, sometimes stammering, sometimes glancing at Serena for moral support. Finally, the chairman spoke with a grave tone. Mr. Banks, your negligence has potentially exposed the company to legal and reputational risks. We'll deliberate on a course of action. Please wait outside. Anderson swallowed hard, nodding. He and Serena stepped into the corridor, hearts pounding. They exchanged a glance but said nothing. Minutes ticked by in excruciating silence. At last, a board member emerged, summoning them back. The chairman delivered the verdict, effective immediately. You're relieved of your CEO duties. Pending the outcome of an internal investigation, you may retain a minority stake in the company, but your power is significantly reduced. Also, the firm may pursue legal action if further evidence arises that you knowingly aided Miss Manning's improper use of funds. A hush fell. Serena exhaled, her pulse racing. Anderson stood motionless, absorbing the blow. After a beat, he said hoarsely, I understand. They left without another word. Inside the elevator, Anderson looked at Serena, tears brimming. It's over, he whispered, voice trembling. Everything I built gone. Serena placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. She felt sympathy, though overshadowed by the memory of his betrayal. You're still here, she said quietly. That counts for something. Outside, the city bustled on, oblivious to Anderson's personal apocalypse. Karma's hand had struck, tearing down the empire he once lorded over. Now, he stood on the street, holding onto Serena's arm for support, both uncertain of where they stood professionally, personally, and as a couple. The final chapter of their shared future loomed in question, demanding an answer neither was fully prepared to give. In the weeks following Anderson's fall from grace, life in the Banks' penthouse changed in ways Serena never imagined. The once bustling phone lines fell silent, invitations to glitzy events ceased. Former colleagues or acquaintances who had eagerly sought Anderson's attention now distanced themselves, worried about associating with scandal. Financially, Anderson wasn't ruined. He still had significant savings and assets outside the firm, but losing the CEO position, the role he'd poured his life into, left him adrift. He spent mornings in the penthouse library, scanning job listings or meeting with old contacts, trying to gauge if there was a path back into the corporate world. His spirit, though, was battered. For the first time, Serena saw humility in his eyes, an awareness of how his choices had brought him here. As for Valerie, gossip suggested she'd left the city, possibly to avoid further inquiry. Serena felt a hollow satisfaction that at least that chapter had ended, yet her heart still wrestled with the question, could she truly forgive Anderson enough to stay? One crisp afternoon, after a marriage counseling session, they strolled quietly through Central Park. Leaves blazed in hues of gold and crimson, crunching underfoot. It was a far cry from their earlier life of chauffeurs and black-tie soirees. They walked side by side, not holding hands, but maintaining a fragile closeness. Eventually, Anderson spoke. "I know an apology isn't enough," he began softly, eyes on the winding path. "But I'm sorry every single day for what I did to us. I made terrible choices both in business and in our relationship. There's no excuse." Serena tucked her hands in her coat pockets, a swirl of emotions at war within her. "I appreciate you saying that," she replied, her voice carrying over the rustle of leaves. "It still hurts, though. I replay that moment of you and Valerie in my head constantly." He nodded, his expression anguished. "I understand. I know trust doesn't just bounce back. I'm prepared to keep working, in counseling, in everything, for as long as it takes if you'll have me." They stopped by a pond where ducks glided serenely on the water's surface. Serena took a shaky breath. She wanted to believe in redemption, in the possibility that people could change. But she also remembered the gut-wrenching pain of betrayal. "I want to give us a chance," she confessed, blinking back tears. "I do still love you. But if we're going to rebuild, we start from scratch honesty, total transparency. No more secrets, no more illusions." Anderson's eyes moistened. He reached out, gently cradling her hand. She let him hold it. "I accept that," he said, voice thick. "I'll earn your trust, step by step." They stood there for a long moment, the world around them moving on. It dawned on Serena that rebuilding might be a slow process full of setbacks, but also that life rarely offered neat endings. Anderson's downfall was partly the closure of one era, but perhaps the opening of another one, where humility and authenticity could shape him into a better partner. In that quiet, leaf-strewn corner of the park, they made an unspoken pact to try. Love, after all, was a complex tapestry, and theirs had been ripped apart. Whether the patches they stitched back together would hold was uncertain, but at least they were finally weaving honesty into every thread. Thank you for following Serena's harrowing journey as she uncovered her husband's betrayal, confronted the mistress who threatened her marriage, and witnessed the downfall of an empire built on secrecy. Through heartbreak, anger, and a faint glimmer of hope, she chose to face the pain head-on, demanding honesty, fighting for dignity, and finding the courage to decide her own future. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, share it with someone who might need a reminder that resilience can grow from life's most devastating moments, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic tales of love, betrayal, and redemption. Your support enables us to continue bringing you stories that examine the raw complexities of human relationships and the unforeseen ways karma can reshape our destinies. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more stories that stir the heart and challenge the soul.